There is a react button down there if you want to react to anything. There is a chat feature if you have any questions that you just don't want to lose. I will not stop midway through. I want to get through it quickly because I know you guys will have questions on this. So if you want to put them in there to hold them, and we'll go back and we'll answer those. I do ask that you hold questions till the end. I'm gonna make it very, very quick. A little bit of background on me. My name is Christopher Trocola. My job is to make sure that AI doesn't eat people. I started off doing this back in 2020. I started working in compliance during the great toilet paper shortage of 2020. If any of us remember that time, it was a whole bunch of fun. So I jumped into that. I jumped into compliance back then in a different industry in 2022 when OpenAI was introduced GPTs to the market is when I really made my break into AI and figuring out what the heck are we working with. In 2023, I started actually building out AI agents before there was a term for it, and I was doing that for fintech companies and having that stuff report to government agencies, which was a lot of fun. I did collaborations with NREL, Department of Energy. A lot of our data went to those type of sections for the industries that we were working with and the fintechs that we were working with. And then in 24, I realized that that space is going to be gone in the future, but the actual future is AI. And I moved into consulting. I started developing a lot of relationships. I worked with legal legislation. I've developed over 10 I got to participate and write 10 laws in the last 6 years, which has been a lot of fun. I've been a state and federal lobbyist. And this is where a lot of this background comes in, where I was able to bring in minds of hundreds of people over this last 2 or 3 years and develop frameworks around this. So now that Trocola can provide AI education through action. ACT is the certification body I had originally formed. I stepped away as CEO so that I can do this with you guys. I am no more than we are just partners with ACT now, so we can do this solely without creating bias in the industry as they continue to grow. What I need you guys to understand of this entire process, if you take anything away from it today, is in the world of AI, data is the new currency, which means that your phone, everything you spent the last 20 years digitizing your entire life, your clients have digitized their entire life, and you can now carry it with you. And you're actually able to carry it with you on your face now with things like Meta glasses. We're going to talk more about this stuff, but this is where data becomes viable and it becomes critical. AI wants data to consume and it wants to compute. That's all it wants to do. The businesses want the data to be able to train the AIs. The smarter the AI, the stronger the company, the closer they get to AGI. That's the geopolitical conversation. We won't be able to talk politics inside of this one, just in case you wanted to. That's not next week, but the week after. But the investment has gone through the roof because it doesn't matter whether or not you believe AGI is a possibility. The money and the governments do. Global AI investment has reached almost $1 trillion. Just in the private sector alone, we have companies that are reaching the $1 trillion valuations here soon, outside of Elon Musk himself, which is good for him. But we've seen some insanity happening over these last couple of years, but we're not seeing return on investment. And there's reasons why for that. The actual enterprise AI investment was over $684 billion, but the delivered value was only about $137 billion. That's not a lot of money for a lot of investment and a lot of time, to where this brought in an entire everybody from different industries with different job functions into one webinar today. The reason why we're not seeing investments is because 80% of all, and this thing's in my way and I can't see, but all AI projects have failed. This has been delivered by Gartner, Forbes, McKinsey, Wall Street. They've all talked about this stuff. They all have statistics and data. No, they're not hallucinations. But we've seen a $4.2 million average abandonment rate on these AI projects, and they just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger every single year. But we've seen this compliance wall that's been hit. In every single one of you, the reason why you're here is because you've seen a billion different compliance posts. You don't want compliance. Nobody wants compliance. It gets in the way of money. You're not wrong at all. Money can definitely pay a lot of the compliance stuff that comes up later, but the regulators are treating AI like an employee. The good news is you already have this solved in your business, which means that you don't need to buy a piece of technology. You don't need to train new people. You don't need to do all kinds of crazy things and hire consultants to get the actual governance structure that's necessary inside of your business. Show you guys a little bit about how that works. Right now, shadow AI breaches are reaching about $4.63 million, 97%. This is according to the IBM 2025 cost of data breach report. 97% had no AI controls in place whatsoever. These are vibe coded tools, no security, no longevity, no governance. We've all heard these things before in compliance. I know it gets boring. I don't want to talk about it either, but we have to. Companies are actively trying to fix this. We're looking at they're hiring consultants, they're hiring AI leadership, they're buying technology, they're trying to do this. So what's the problem? Why is it not getting any better at all? Well, it's because they have no idea what they're hiring for. By a show of hands, go ahead and hit the emoji buttons or put it in the chat. Who in here is hiring for AI leadership or applying for AI leadership or have read an AI leadership post? You see it? Yep, raise a hand right there. See, we've all done it. Okay. We're seeing a lot of these things. You want to know what's crazy? We reviewed hundreds of these things. Just last night beforehand, I went and just did 35 new ones. I've reviewed hundreds of them. They all have the exact same issues. They have no idea what the heck they're hiring for. 35, I gave you guys the top 10. I didn't name the companies just because one time the company actually came in and I didn't know it. So I didn't name the companies for compliance purposes. But healthcare, construction, legal defense, education, insurance, entertainment, ISP, and telecom, and government were the top 10 industries that I was viewing on this. The hours per week for the jobs that they were posting were 62 hours for a CAIO. Head of AI, 71 hours. A CTO, CISO, CDO, and a CAIO, 93 hours a week, with job functions of 8 departments. The one that really got me was government director of AI, 118 hours, and it had 9 different roles inside of one job function. The only time we saw something, the signal this strong inside of the market, was the creation of the chief technology officer and the chief digital officer. Those were the only 2 times. It's creating that new title and what the responsibilities are going to be, but it's very new. So we had to spend some time and try to figure out what is happening here. Well, they're looking for unicorns, right? We're looking for a highly trained educator, somebody who knows operating systems, AI systems, an expert developer. They're a licensed attorney. They're an HR compliance specialist. They handle the budgets. They're vendor negotiations. They do board presentations, employee meetings. Oh yeah, and they work 19 hours a day and they don't sleep. They're looking for Batman. Batman. Okay. They're looking for Batman. It's not going to happen. You're not going to find that person, which is why we've seen incredible failure rates, which is a problem. In order to be able to properly do this, they would have had to start their training before COVID. Let me show you something. Right now, in order to be able to get the education necessary to build an AI department, chiefs' jobs are to run departments. To have the education necessary in order to be able to do so, that means that you're going to be looking at, just with what they're looking for on these job posts, they want a lawyer, $150,000 in 10 years of schooling. Well, 5 to 7 years. The CISSP, the CIPP, the AIG, the SMBRP, the PMP, the Chicago Booth CAIO certification. These are no different than the Grant Cardone certifications, the Tony Robbins certifications. We've mapped all these, and I've audited the syllabus of these, and I've audited set of the actual certifications myself, and they all have the same issues. They're very focused on the technology, but none of them are talking about the business piece of it. And it's over $185,000 with 7 different certifications and 6 different disciplines to understand the architecture of what a department should look like, but still doesn't teach you the actual business case of it. Go ahead and do clap hands, hearts, whatever it is. I want to know, would you trust your thumbs up and thumbs down? We actually got those emojis in this one. We used to do this on Copilot. We didn't have thumbs up and thumbs down sometimes. Did you guys have that one? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Or put in the chat, yes or no. Would you trust a CTO to run the budget for your company? Let's see it. Yes or no? No, sure not. No. Right, it's not their job, right? Do you know what one of the most common promotion levels is, or handling of all AI? Go ahead and put it in the chat. What do you think it is? CTO, CISO, right? This becomes a major issue. It's not just that. It's not just the actual CAIOs. The CTO roles are now being just like their AI leadership roles. But quick question for any else in here. Yes or no in the chat. Would you trust your head of development to train your sales staff on how to use the tech? Would you trust a third-party vendor to have access to your books and your accounting software? Would you trust, and I can do this all day. The answer is going to be no to every single one of these, right? Depends on the compliance. Lucas, I like that. But the fact is, the answer is going to be no for most of these things, right? Governance is your culture, it's your communication. This has been weaponized on LinkedIn to mean a piece of technology or some layer that's being put in there that's invisible that nobody knows and sees. No, you've been communicating already. I'm going to go over what that means here in a minute, but you've already been doing this for quite some time. That's the booth thing that's there. But this is important on your communication structure and what governance actually is because we need to have the right terms. Okay. Unexpressed expectations or improper expectations meet poor delivery. This is a critical distinction. So I need to give you guys the right definition. Every single one of you in this room are going to have your own AI within 5 years, whether you like it or not. If you have a smartphone, you're going to have your own AI system. It's just that simple, which means that every single one of your employees, your attorneys, your vendors, your customers are all going to have their own AI system, not just an algorithm, a system. Why is this important? We've already reached more bot traffic. You guys have already seen this. It's a stat you've already seen on LinkedIn. If you hadn't, it's we're 57%. We've already reached the crossover where there's more bots online than humans. This is what shadow AI ends up looking like inside your organization. It's just a general chat bot that your employees thought was going to be okay because you never properly trained them to not use it. And then it starts multiplying. Or maybe it's just the ChatGPT free system that they're using because they don't like the enterprise version of Claude that you got. They don't know that they're not allowed to do that either. Or what about the tool that they found on LinkedIn that they use their company email to create the account with, and now that has OAuth access to all the client emails, and that was never supposed to have that. Now you're training a third-party vendor on that stuff too. All these are little shadow AI infractions that companies are getting busted for. What about the Otter AI? Or what about the note takers that you didn't know that were going inside of some of these meetings? Or what about that one? I don't know if you guys have seen it, because this is what we find. Most companies think they have like 8 tools. It's like 47, sometimes even more. You guys seen those ones where it's the script reader, where it's listening in? Show me yes or no inside the chat. It's listening in on your conversation and it's telling you what to say to the client. Have you guys seen that? These things are training on biometric data, which is against the law, especially if they're California residents, Illinois, New York, and they're making decisions on employment. All this stuff is very, very, very real. So this is a device gap. So every governance technology in the market works on company networks and stuff like that. So what about the phones? This is an important thing. Now there's a signal in here on how to turn that into an ROI function that we explain through our certification courses. But if you think about it this way, your employees are spending $20 a month on a ChatGPT thing that's saving them. They're making $15 an hour. It saves them 2 hours, 2 hours a week. Well, they're saving a lot more than you are on your business implementation from AI. Why aren't we talking to our employees about this? Because they don't trust you when it comes to AI is one of the biggest problems that we've seen. Okay, 6.5 time return on the employee's investment. Employees are doing better than the business leaders on implementation of AI. But the trade-off is that it's creating a bunch of data leaks, and that's where the liability turns back over to the employee or to the company. So this is how we have to fix that type of stuff. Now, chiefs run department. They do departments run the communication. The communication is the way the world communicates. Okay, it used to be person to person, and then during the great toilet paper shortage, we saw this huge situation happen where if you didn't have Uber and you were a restaurant, you didn't operate your business. If you didn't have Instagram, WhatsApp, Stripe, Square, these are the leaders of the world. These are the companies that run the entire infrastructure of our economy globally. Meta, Anthropic, OpenAI, Google. Why? Because they all assumed in 2015 that every single one of you are going to have a smartphone, and they bet their companies on it and they won. This is what needs to happen with AI. And the progression is real. In 2020, when everybody moved to home, that ramp period got escalated really quickly to where people needed to figure out how we're going to do this. And companies either spent a ton of money to catch up to the companies that were prepared and they were able to stay relevant, or they fell behind or sometimes even shut down. And now in 2025, we saw all this bot to human communication, and now we're seeing more bot to bot human communication within anytime in the near future. This is what it's going to look like on the web. We built the world, Google mapped it, and now we're populating that world. If you think about it that way, it makes it really easy to understand the way the progression is going to happen. Okay? So communication is how your executives communicate to the departments, departments communicate to the employees, employees communicate to the world, and you explain that to the regulators. That is all governance is. It is that simple when you try to define it. There is no piece of technology. There is no single consultant that can do that. There is no single CAIO that can do that. It takes time, and it can be done correctly, but it takes the right people and the right motivations to do it. But you also need to have that right strategy. Governance becomes a byproduct of successful implementations when strategy is the main focus. So companies are not ready to interact with individual AI systems, and this is what we found through all of our communications. 51% of web traffic is now bots. 80% service queries are handled by AI by 2029. 57.5% of web traffic is now automated. So the person that you're looking for doesn't exist inside these departments. We figured that out. The solution is the CT framework. There are 9 deliverables that we mapped out, and we start with some very, very simple functions. But at the end of the day, we have to start with the actual leadership cores. Okay? We need leadership inside of each of the departments that communicate with each other, so you have this cross-departmental communication. What we do is something very simple. We have a 5-department, basically rent-a-department function, where it's the CAIO, consultants, who are all trained underneath the ACT certification, legal and developers are going to go in, build the actual AI department and function for your business to be able to take over after 4 months. Now you can turn it on or off as the company chooses, and we can be called back as advisors if ever is necessary, or you can keep the CAIO if you choose as well. Okay? Our goal, again, is education through action. So we have to make sure that you have the right experts in place in order to be able to train everybody that's necessary. So a couple of tools that we like to use are things like the actual governance systems. These should be built out inside your org. This is something that, there are some cool tools that do this, but this is something that your development team should actually be coordinating with and build out simultaneously as the systems are built, where it shows your employees what they've been trained on, when they've been trained on it, so that you're protected under Title VII under the repository systems, finding AI fluency. These are absolutely critical components and some of the first things that should be happening with the CAIO inside of any of your strategies, because you cannot enforce a standard that you never defined. The standard is simple: delivery, network, credential, tech, and the actual engine itself. Everything else just meets in the middle. That's all we have to do. So this is why we run this 5-department program, to make it simple, easy, repeatable. We are doing this now. We have been doing this before. To date, in my last several years of certifications and compliance, I have certified over 4,700 different, thank you. Cool. 4,700 individuals. I have protected over $500,000 in regulated contracts. And I've been doing this as a fractional CIO, as a CEO, and leader in multiple different industries. So if you want to get in touch with me outside of this, if you want to learn more about becoming a consultant that works with us, you don't work for us. We do not hire any consultants directly. But if you want to get ACT certified, be one of our consultants. Hop on the website, theact.com/Trocola is for the advisory. This is where you can communicate with our teams about how to get certified and what that looks like. We have a certification class starting next Wednesday. Goes Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for 45 minutes of live instruction every day for 4 weeks, with some self-paced stuff that goes through that teaches on that, eventually getting you to a CAIO certification. If you're an organization that wants to talk more about governance, get a half hour of my time and a CAIO that will do a review on your job postings for AI leadership, a quick review on strategy, or even talk about what it looks like to have one of our departments. Absolutely do that. Or if you just want to get a professional certification, we are offering those professional certifications both virtually and in person at our live seminars as well. So you can book for any one of those reasons as well. I'm going to go ahead and make you guys available for questions, comments. I like to make these things quick, and I will repeat anything. There usually are a whole bunch of questions, so let's do it. Bart, you're up first.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for the very interesting presentation. I am wondering, how long do you think it takes until there's like a black swan event? Because, yeah, you know about the ChatGPT hacking, etc., in the last few weeks, and that basically changes the entire dynamic in the markets, whereby, yeah, Congress comes in and basically mandates this maybe for companies, or the entire, yeah, structure of how this is implemented changes overnight, basically.
I like the question because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when at this point. The executive order that was signed does not block state level legislation to the extent that most people believe that there is no executive order that can make that unilaterally. We will see something very large happening. I am part of the Genesis mission, so I do have communications with a lot of these regulators. I still stay very connected on policy. Um, the problem is the way that they're looking at this is from the technology standpoint, and I think that's where the federal government needs to stay for now, because the regulators have already been treating it as an employee for the last several years, which is why we have the lawsuits that have stuck the way they have. So we're not seeing a long time before we see something big happen. There's 1,400 pieces of legislation currently being reviewed. There's 45 pieces of technology or pieces of legislation that have already been passed and are active both federally and at state level. So it could be a matter of months at this point. I want to say somewhere between 12 and 18 months where we'll see just there's going to be just a wipe across the board of if you're not ready, you don't have these AI departments. It's going to be kind of like that 2020. It's going to wipe the slate clean of companies who aren't ready. It's going to have that consolidation kind of effect, the cannibalization of the industry for the smaller companies, which we've already seen with ChatGPT and Anthropic, swallowing up some of these vibe coded tools as internal tools. So yeah, 12 months at most, I think, 18 months at most.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Lucas, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for the presentation. Really insightful. My question is, as agentic AI evolves and, inevitably continues to grow, how do you see like cybersecurity and compliance? Do you see it becoming blurred or redundant or being complementary? Like, I'm sure you must have a lot of thoughts on that. So,
I do have a lot of thoughts, and I don't know if Joe Moore's in here, but this is actually a fun topic that we talked about recently on his mastermind. Um, because and this is what our framework looks at. What is the business use case of it versus what is the actual technological standpoint? Where does the data layer lie in between? And there's going to be some blurred lines in the very beginning, but we start looking at the components of, well, what happens when the AI is your data, right? Just like your phone. More people are willing to hand me their phone than they would be willing to admit until they figure out what I'm going to do with it. As soon as I open it up, I start looking at pictures and I turn the camera over to their face and it unlocks their face. Now we start understanding that, oh, this is my life, right? So is there a different insurance component that's going to happen with that? These are things that we're having conversations about at the insurance level. Do we have to insure it the same way that we do a vehicle? What happens when our AI does something that it shouldn't, or we direct it to where it makes an accident on the web and it creates a crash, right? What are these type of things? Are some of the biggest things that we're looking at on kind of like more that like 30,000 foot view. The biggest things I focus on are on the business cases right now, which help us lead up to that and get the data. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to be honest with you guys the same way. The reason why Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, all these companies they're in the trillions, hundreds of billions and trillions, is because they're going to be honest. We don't know how AI works, but we know where we're going to go with it, right? And we're going to find out the rest of these pieces along the way. And we're kind of that same way. We know what we know, but we don't know what we don't know. There's a lot of pieces we don't know yet, but we know enough to be able to protect the businesses that we. I hope that answers the question.
yeah, thank you.
My question ties a little bit into that, or is like a
Yeah.
continuation.
Okay.
Because like saying about continuous improvement, we have seen it, I think, the last 15, 20 years if we are in IT. I myself also as tech producer coming in with companies. And if you're coming in as an outside consultant and you like even get the mandate from the executive level and C-level, one thing I kept seeing over and over again, especially in security, IT, we're looking at QA, pipeline optimization, and especially also data protection. And especially something like CAIO that entangles so many different factors now, way more than everything what we have seen before. Like it's like you're putting cloud together with security, with
Yeah.
law, with marketing, everything. So how do you see with all that, even if you get a decision making, then you can make sure that we don't have this failure pattern of we coming in and we changing things and then again it breaking down. Even if we can change things in 4 months, that is like quite small. How do you see like that companies also uphold those and work together? Are you planning to have long-term relationship with the companies, or you think like
So
you can make sure that you have an impact in those 4 months as you would like to have a real impact and make an action through that? How do you have to structure it and plan?
So it's there. There's two components of it. Yes, we do plan on long-term engagement for multiple reasons. Number one, the regulatory landscape is changing, and 30 days after we leave, the an executive order could be signed implementing an entire framework on what the approval process is going to be look like for every AI model moving forward. We need to provide that value back to that client without recharging them an entire engagement, right? So there's going to be continued communication that we have with our clients, which is one of the biggest pieces that they love about us. It's like, look, you're going to pay for us to help build this thing out, but we need to make sure that you're protected long term. If you need us for more than that, we do have advisory opportunities, and then again, we have continued education for all of our certified consultants and CAIOs and technologists to make sure that they stay consistent and up to date on the current regulatory landscape. The other piece of that is it's kind of like what entrepreneurs do. We break stuff and we have to fix it right, right? Like we find a piece of the industry that's broken, we find our niche, we have to break it a little bit, and then we can put it back together and hand it back to everybody else. That's kind of what happens inside of our engagements. One of the biggest issues right now with anything involving AI is that the AI does not the strategy does not outlive the person. That's the problem. If you bring in a CAIO and they get fired, die, quit, or retire, the AI strategy is gone. Maybe they wrote a couple things down. Maybe they understood the entire process of interdepartmental communication. Maybe they trained some leadership. This is what we found in most of our engagements. So first thing we have to do is there's a standard operating procedure problem that needs to be solved with a lot of AI. The other component of it is really championing the employees behind it because there's no trust. These AI systems are going to break. They're going to go find new AI systems. If they don't trust what the company's doing with the AI and the initiative that's behind it, there's no support, and the chances of failure are even higher at that point. So we look at it from like I have a post that's going out recently because I was asked this question about Bill Gates. He said a long time ago, I envision everybody having a laptop on their desk, having a computer on their desk, right? That's what he said. And he was laughed at, so he was able to walk away with Microsoft, and he built one of the biggest companies in the entire world. But the employees knew what the goal was the entire time. When we're seeing these failures and these breaks happening, a lot of times it's because the employees have no idea what your actual strategy is or what you're going to do with AI. So they just think they're going to get fired or replaced or they're going to lose their hours. So that's a big piece of it too. We have a human problem inside of these engagements.
So what I understand is that you basically in these 4 months, so not only like establish a new system, but also something that is like not like short term, but mid and long term by basically reducing change friction, because also that is one of the things I actually had another question about, like change friction about especially employees, like why they're looking for the new line because it's a rat race. Everyone wants to be faster, don't no one wants to be fired. So if you reduce that fear and produce a system and framework and give them like, hey, this is where you operate, you're safe. Let's focus on your work, and you have this long term. That's where I can see this working out, and that
That's
answers my question. Yeah.
Yep. And we got to get leaders from every single department to be able to move in. Like you kind of have this like de facto little department that gets developed inside of every single department with a leader and an SOP and a training process and attestations and all these little things that kind of build that outlive an individual themselves. So we have a repeatable process and communication structure. But that means that we need sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 different consultants, whether it's IT or others, to be able to come in and develop that specific section during that engagement. And this is why we've developed this, like, sometimes we have 5 different leaders that run in with legal, or sometimes we have 10. And this is why we're constantly recruiting for more consultants to get certified, more CAIOs, because then they get hired after the engagement sometimes, where the CAIOs, they end up getting placed constantly. They've been interviewing with that company for 4 months, showing how great they are. Trocola leaves, and all of a sudden, Alan's like, "Hey, they just offered me a fractional gig. I'm gonna see you later." Like, well, okay, guess we won't see you for a couple months. So that happens, and we're happy about that. We want to help as much as we can. Raul, go ahead. Appreciate the question, Oliver.
Uh, yeah, thank you. I really like the presentation again. But I do have a question for the future. So you say in 5 years, everybody is probably going to have their own local AI in some way, shape, or form. What happens then with the training of the multiple models? Where do the data sets come from? And this is not a question for individuals, but for companies. Does a company buy a data set, or how are we going to, provide some basis for a new company that just employs, a safe local internal AI system?
I spent sometimes weeks inside of training trying to get people to understand that question you just asked right there. And a lot of people don't get it. And the reason why is because we're stuck in a little bit of a rat race right now on the geopolitical scale, but AI is everywhere, so people feel like they're behind. You are at the forefront to be able to answer those specific questions on what they're going to do by developing the systems or the infrastructure necessary to provide those systems to your clients. Okay. There are a
It
lot of
can make sense, yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities. Now, the reason why I say that is because the companies that have already determined that you have a smartphone are already getting us up to 2 terabytes of data. Now, and we've already had interactions with Siri and Gemini and all these other systems. You already have Gemini on your phone. What happens when it's already personalized to you? It already has its own little understanding of what it is. It may not be the actual, complete model within 3 to 5 years, but this is where we're seeing, is it a humanoid robot that blocks communications for you, right? There's going to be a component of it on your actual smart devices themselves where it's going to help filter content for you better than the algorithm ever did, where it's going to infiltrate inside of Meta, so that you're not seeing certain things and bypassing it. What happens when you can't just pay off the algorithm to show you these systems? Now, these are questions that you may not necessarily need to answer right now, but they're questions that need to be posed right now that your company is preparing for. That's the purpose of a department versus a single person or a committee.
That's some useful insights. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for the question. I love that question. But yeah, I get it. One of the things I'm doing, I'm actually, as soon as I leave here, I'm hopping in the car and I'm heading up to Phoenix. So I'm doing my Mr. Wonderful today. I got my business shirt on, but I got my shorts on because it's I want to be driving. But you guys would have never known that if I didn't tell you. I get to see a lot of these pitches. What I've seen with vectorization, what I've seen with quantum right now, and how that's going to have communications reduce the actual storage capacity and a lot of the load. I would, if you haven't looked into it, I'd recommend looking into it, and you'll start seeing where that picture goes, where what an AI, because what we understand about how AI is and where it's going to be is like looking at a Nokia and then trying to describe an iPhone to somebody 30 years ago. Okay. that's where we're at right now. AI, the way that you think about it right now, is not the way it's going to look in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So I would definitely start looking into some of that, and it'd help you get a little bit your head wrapped around that question, why that's one of my favorites. Go ahead, Bart.
Yeah, a little bit related to the question that Raul asked earlier, but also on that data that will be more and more in hands of individuals, companies, and no longer in the public domain, basically. How do you see the role there of like blockchain technology or similar for security for securing the data to make sure that it remains in your hands, also in companies, but also at the individual level, right? I can imagine that a person maybe yeah, a little bit of the similar system that is used in Bitcoin to make sure that you own your coins. That the same system is used to make sure that you own the data, and that is also applied company wide. Also for verification reasons, like who has access to the data, what is done with the data, etc. So, what's your vision there?
So there's actually a lot of components to that. There's a lot the major companies, so especially Meta, they've already started this process. Most companies have where your passwords have become an authentication key, right? Um, I tie a lot of stuff back to movies sometimes because I grew up as a movie nerd, but it's what we saw back in the 90s of what they thought it was always going to be, what a flash drive would look like and how we would all log in constantly, right? And it ended up being biometric data instead. So all these data points are going to end up going through authentication keys that may be run by AI systems or internal AI systems or personal AI systems that's going to control the data and what is accessible through the world. Our world versus AI's world, the internet. Okay. That is a very, very different conversation. And it's a good one. It's worth having just because your AI is the data that it's trained on. 100%, just like you guys. I cannot remove anything that I just put inside your guys' head right now, right? And some of you guys, I see the wheels turning. You're like, I got some, I know what I want to go do right now, right? Whether it's contact us or go do something or go build something, your guys' juices are flowing right now. Your gears are turning. And I love to see that because that's what happens with AI. So this again is where when it goes back to protection of data, what we classify as data needs to be redefined a little bit. Is probably one of the biggest things, and I do see that happening a lot in the actual legislative fields that we're looking at, and a lot of the markets that we're looking in, where biometric never used to be really considered something that needed to be ultra protected, is now like Otter AI class action lawsuit. You've been stealing biometric data and training on it. Meta, you are if you don't, and it goes back to opt-in, opt-out is one of the biggest features for business that we look at right now because a lot of the vendors are auto opting you in because you signed a clause about being able to train their systems, and AI didn't exist to the extent that it does now when they had that. So there's a lot of stuff that we do very, very early on in our engagements for the business's protections, where we're auditing vendors, we're auditing contracts, we're looking at the shadow AI that exists inside the org. We do it by a lot of times we don't control the business, we're not taking over the business, but we do it like on a handshake deal. Like, look, we're gonna find a lot of shadow AI inside the organization. Your employees are scared, so we need you to promise that you're not going to fire them for it. And we're going to use this as a training signal on who's going to be a leader inside your organization. And we usually get about 80% of the AI on the first pass that way, which is really, really cool. But it's a lot of how we do it too. And we have those surveys available if you guys are curious about those. So that should answer your question a little bit and get those gears turned into. Oliver?
Yeah, thanks.
Of course. Thank you.
Great question. I love it, especially when we can say we can quantify what we do and how to get outcomes, because else how do you know if it really worked and that you can also continue working on that, building on that, and make sure you do it long term. And I'm quite curious with all that framework, and you mentioned right now the numbers to get in the first, for example, screen swipe, 60, 70, even 80, 90% of the AI. That you catch that. So I'm quite curious, like if you like, how do you exactly quantify that, especially with shadow AI, where there is also fluidity, but also then how is that impacting the business of going, okay, what is the business impact now, and also on the different fields, like because you mentioned that 5 different departments, how do you make sure like, okay, you have a good overview and impact outcome, the KPI?
So every engagement is very, very unique. But one of the reasons why we know your employees are super honest with us that they don't like you. It's just that simple. When it comes to AI, they don't trust you. They don't like anything that you're doing with it. And there's a piece of our survey that goes in there and we sign, like they could sue us if we gave it to you. Literally says, we want to know exactly how you feel about your company and what they're doing with AI. And if you're hiding additional tools beside what you're going to list, there's zero punishment from us, right? And that's for our data, and they give us authorization to be able to do that. It's usually 80%. And the reason why is because they don't trust the company's going to be able to do something, or that they're actually going to hold to their word and not fire them or use them to train the system to have them replaced. That is the standard conversation that happens with most of the employees.
Okay,
I think
thank you
there's
very
a
much
second part
for
of the
answering.
question that you want to answer too, right?
For that, yeah, that was the another part where I said, okay, once you have that data, how do you utilize them to make those changes in the departments and then get quantifiable outcomes for the business then? That's the next step then.
So there's actually a couple of surveys that we run very early on with employment, with vendors, and with potential management of AI systems for either vertical or horizontal alignment. We have to define those. Number one, what is the company's goals and what is the actual strategy? These are some very tough conversations. The more time you guys spend with me, Alan will tell you I'm a very direct person, and I do it with constructive criticism in mind. Where I'm going to tell you that's a garbage strategy. I don't ever want to hear it again for a very specific reason. Steve Jobs didn't get to where he is because he didn't tell his employees about Siri. He bought it and he said, "This is what we're going to do with it. This is AI. This is amazing." And they created the voice assistants that we grew up with until we had ChatGPT, right? The strategy has to make sense, trainable, and repeatable. Once we have that, now we can start building actual metrics and KPIs. And if you're really honest with yourself when you're looking at the AI strategies that you've been developing or that you have seen being developed, now I'm not going to say everybody's AI strategies are bad because they're not, or we wouldn't be sitting here today. Most of them don't actually have a true end goal in mind that can be trained, repeated, and has a process behind it that would make sense for the entire world or segment to be able to use.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, most of what I see out there, is quicksand, most people building on, and like that is not something you can build on long term there.
I
And maybe
wasn't going to
Raoul
bring
has
it up.
also a good point
Did
on
you hear
that.
about the Mayo Clinic's whistleblower?
No, I haven't heard about this one. I'll take a look.
The chief AI implementation officer 6 months ago said that he's not responsible for governance or compliance. He's responsible for implementation. And then a whistleblower just came out and said that they are hiding a 67% failure rate with their AI Maya.
Not bad.
There was no strategy. Like if you look at it, there was no end goal in mind. It was to say that they were the first to have this type of AI system, hoping for an acquisition or some type of market share. And that's what we've seen. That's not going to fly anymore. So those companies have already been acquired. Every industry has 5 phases: dreamers, bankers, salespeople, sharks, and thieves. And then that repeats until the bubbles eventually burst and you have commodity. Okay. When you recognize that cycle and repeat, you know exactly where your business is going to enter the market and where it's going to execute. Right now, salespeople have already figured out what they're going to sell and how they're going to sell it. So we're moving into the shark era where we're seeing a lot of just garbage happening. We're seeing a lot more lawsuits come up. So we really need to start figuring out now what do we do to be able to create the actual strategies and that long-term implementation to cement my business to either be foundational, legacy, or survive this black swan event. Thank you, Bart. Right? That's coming up in the next 12, 18, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. We need to be ready for it now. So thank you
Thanks
for
for
that.
answering my question, Chris.
Roll.
Yeah, this is actually not a question. It's just a comment that generally what I think, what I see, that the first goal is to make the company more efficient and save on costs preferably on employee costs. So even if they don't have a sound strategy, the first idea is to let's automate everything away. And of course, that is not possible, especially if you don't think it through.
100%. Everybody needs ROI. If I'm going to invest $1 million in something, I want my money back and I want a profit on it because I just trusted you with $1 million, right? So you're 100% right on that. You couldn't have said, I couldn't have said it better myself. But guess what? The employees are actually doing a better job at it than the businesses, and it's hilarious to watch. It's hilarious to watch. This is one of my favorite things because so now I have a couple more engagements that I'm phasing off of myself now that we're scaling. And we're focused mainly on $50 million ARR and up. We will do engagements down to $10 million, or we provide those to some of our smaller partner firms or certified consultants to be able to do. But on the engagements, I kind of get to sit as an advisor over like most of the projects that we oversee, and it's just the conversations I get to have is they're a lot more fun than I would be able to do as a CAIO when I talk to the executives, and that's usually the first thing they say is like, "You just need to make some money on this thing because the board is pissed." Like, yeah, I would be pissed too. You just burned $10 million and you have nothing to show for it but a couple of automations that you could have done for $20 in a Zapier license.
Yeah, well, this is exactly my thought that it's understandable from the perspective of the employees who say, okay, I'm not going to disclose everything that I use because then you will automate my work and fire me ultimately. I mean, that may be understandable or even true, but first and foremost,
That's why we look at
removing,
vertical and
yeah,
horizontal movement, right? This is the ramp period.
right.
So one of the research papers that I published recently, if you haven't had a chance to read it, it's called The Great AI Transition. I have a book that's coming out based off of that, and it speaks to specifically the ramp period that employees are going through. The 4.3% doesn't. We're not at a catastrophe yet when it comes to unemployment, but we are at a catastrophe in underemployment, where it's 8.2% and 4.3 million Americans are no longer full-time employed. So they lost their benefits, they lost full-time pay, and they're working multiple jobs to be able to make ends meet. So they're terrified of AI because it's not eating all the jobs, it's eating all the full-time jobs. And all they can do is Uber and DoorDash in order to be able to go back to work the next day to afford to get the gas, and they still can't even pay their bills. And now foreclosure rates are skyrocketing, 1.25 trillion in credit card debt. It's insane what we're seeing with that. Labor participation has been going bad for it has, and it's getting worse. It's getting much, much worse, which is why a lot of companies they feel like they have to automate because of silent quitting, and the new generation is horrible. And this is all you hear. Maybe it's your company. Let's talk about that for a minute. Are you sure is you sure it's the entire generation, or does your company suck for 5 minutes? What is more likely? If your companies trust you and they're happy and they're employed and they're fed and they can feed their families, do you think they'd have more loyalty and want to stay and wouldn't want to silently quit? Now, is that always the case? No, that's not always the case. But you're telling them you're going to implement some new technology that exists for 5 minutes that has the knowledge of the mass culmination of knowledge with the wisdom of a 5-year-old with a pair of scissors and a Sharpie, and you just let it loose in your business. And you want them to trust you now. That's where we're at inside of the workforce. And that's usually the fun conversation I get to have with these guys. They get really pissed and then they're like, oh, you're right. So feel free to steal that anytime. Use it. They like it. Any more questions? We got just a few more minutes. If you don't mind, I am going to jump off 5 till just because I got a 2-hour drive to get to this pitch event I'm a judge for today. Guys, one of the things that I learned and is very, very simply, AI is not a one-person job. I went into this building out frameworks and then trying to train consultants so that they can go in there and they could just implement these inside of companies, realizing really quickly that this is not a one-person job. Even if you have all the AI in the world helping you with it, it's still not a one-person job. Because AI is only as good as the information that it's trained on. and it's never been trained on this. What we're going through hasn't existed unless you look at it on a business case, and then it starts making the job easier. So go ahead, Lucas.
Yeah, just I just wanted to clarify something that you said when you were talking, just like the hypothetical survey that they would sue. Were you saying that the employees have distrust in the AI systems of their employers, or were you saying that the employers distrust the AI usage within their employees, or both ways?
The employees. So it is both ways. You'd be surprised how often. If you guys looked at, I was in Vegas doing a conference, and an entire room. I ended up telling, like, your employees don't care that much about you. They're not trying to hurt you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the biggest problem is the business owners or the C-suite just assumes that all the employees are out to get them all the time. And they're not. They don't care that much. They just want to make their check and feed their families. That's all they want. So they get the AI to do the job a little bit better. But the employees literally do not at all trust their employers when it comes to AI. So it is that way. So what we do is we have a sentiment, and it is required that they have a specific amount of engagement, which means this is typically only for like medium-sized businesses and up, because more than 100 employees, it's really hard to pinpoint who did it, like the suggestion box thing, right? We'll give them a sentiment percentage of what employees said, but it will never be tied back to an individual. They will never know. It even scrambles it for us. No AI is used in any of our surveys at all. It is all general algorithms, predetermination, in order to be able to avoid any type of bias inside of these things too. So we know when and when not to use AI.
Yeah, and like you said, that most people, right, there's always the disgruntled employee,
Yep.
but most people are not malicious actors, right? They're just trying to work and do a good job and use technology where they see a use case for it.
Yep. 100% right. I've been a disgruntled employee before. I think we all have, right? We wouldn't be in the types of roles we are right now if we haven't been disgruntled. I quit my McDonald's job at 18 years old by throwing the manager's headset into the deep fryer. So you're gonna have those. They're unavoidable. But if you're creating that through an environment, then that goes back to the company, and we can find that. And that's probably one of the hardest things for a lot of these companies to swallow. But this is where governance hasn't been able to catch up for a very specific reason. Companies don't care. They just want ROI. And what we were able to discover over this last 18 months of really just putting our heads down and figuring this out and deploying it through individual systems is just like this. Governance is a byproduct of a properly implemented strategy. It is that simple. I'll take one more question from you guys if you guys have any.
Yeah, I'll go. The biometric data, because you mentioned that earlier, I would think the whole dynamic would be completely different in the West, where they kind of care about human rights, at least, well, they say they care.
Yeah,
And like China, where, yeah, nobody cares.
nobody
And
cares.
the whole dynamic would be
Yeah.
different with using biometric data in AI there, I think.
Yep. And it's also very different with the UK and the way they handle the biometric data, and how does that come back to the US? Where is it stored? Cross borders? There's a lot of different landscapes that every single business has their own individual. And this is what I mean by governance. It's communication, right?
Yeah.
LinkedIn has literally just weaponized infrastructure, and like every time I see the posts, I just want to scream. Like that's how irritated I am with it. Because it's ChatGPT recycling something that we're sick and tired of hearing. When you look at it directly, these businesses have scaled to what they are. You have scaled to what you've done because of how you communicate to the world. If you didn't do it in a compliant fashion, right? You know how you can fix it. You know how you can avoid it. All we got to do is map your governance structure. We'll plug the holes as we find them, and on the way to implement the strategy correctly. And it becomes really easy, especially when it comes to biometric data, because right now it is now looking like it's becoming a county level issue. So like New York local law is doing a third party audit trail requirement on employment decisions and bias testing. So bias testing would end up being biometric data, and that could end up having a whole new component behind it. So, I mean, if we're looking at county by county, this is what the executive order is trying to avoid. and I understand that, but this could get really, really dicey really quickly. So good point. Good. I'm glad you brought that back up. All right, guys. Fantastic meeting everybody. I do this every week. I give some new data. If you are interested, I'm going to go ahead and drop it inside the chat. If you are interested in learning more about engaging with us in any way, shape, or form, whether it's as a consultant, a developer, getting certified, or just hiring us or hiring one of our consultants, jump on, book a one-on-one with me inside of there. Myself, Alan, or one of our team will be able to jump on with you, have that conversation, and see how we can support you. Again, 30 minutes. We're not charging you for any of that to be able to have this initial conversation. Okay. I hope you guys have an amazing day and wish me a safe drive because it's 2 hours in Arizona heat and crazy drivers. So bye, guys.
Godspeed.
Safe drive.
Ladies and
Thank you.
gentlemen, everybody, I want to make sure on PC that's recorded.